Undead Unluck ends its first chapter with a kiss. In a different manga, that would be sweet. But when said kiss is between the severed head of a man who's literally immortal and a girl who causes actual cataclysms whenever she makes contact with someone, well, it could get a little bit absolutely absurd. But beneath all that absurdity is some of the most compelling character writing I have ever seen in shonen, as each character battles with their individual negator abilities, which are more like a curse than a unique superpower, to fight the very god that bestowed these abilities onto them, all while trying to live a life worth living. This is the insanity in Undead Unluck's humanity. Undead Unluck on its first glance is similar to your typical battle shonen, but there are several key concepts that pile up that make it a tad, well, the first paragraph said it best, absolutely absurd. And it's an understanding that absurdity that shows how human the story can be. But to give an idea of what absurd truly means, by chapter 9, the plot has gone from joining a secret organization called the Union to trying to kill actual God. That was not a hyperbole in the intro. But other than being enough to probably classify Undead Unluck as a JRPG, wanting to kill God is a daunting enough goal that it contextualizes all the absurdity that is normally packed into each arc. That said, they're not just gonna walk up to God to fight him. There is an escalation to the absurdity, as each arc more or less serves as prep work for this ultimate goal. That preparation being done by accepting video game style quests from this book, Apocalypse, and receiving rewards that range from godly weapons called artifacts, the ability to have more than specifically 10 members in the Union, or just a comfort that comes from avoiding a punishment that would rewrite how the world works if all of the challenges are overcome. While the system is formulaic, the subjects of these quests are far from it. The world itself in Undead Unluck is an ever-changing playground of ideas and concepts that are added and taken away, and most of the quests in the series are based on the creatures responsible for this. Umas, or unidentified mysterious animals, are the physical embodiments of rules that make up the universe. Apocalypse's quests normally involve eliminating or capturing one of these creatures, but the kicker is, if these Umas die, their associated phenomenon gets erased with them. While there are plenty of Uma that write how the world functions, even more can be added in the event of a quest failure, which changes how the world of Undead Unluck works in crazy ways. Like how an Uma called Galaxy was added, which is a canonical reason why more than just the Earth and Moon exist in the series, which wasn't the case earlier on. And everyone but the Negator's memories are altered, so they all remember always having a universe, which is why the series suddenly has a Day of the Week system, which didn't exist beforehand. And did I mention if 101 quests are failed, then that means Ragnarok happens? But quest rewards can also change the world, even in ways different from our own. Like uniting every language so everyone just speaks English. It's so engaging as we see through different reveals or physical changes just how separate from reality Undead Unluck truly is. Because despite how absurd things can get, Undead Unluck starts off of a setting not too unlike the real world, but with just one core exception. That exception, however, is by far the best part of both world building and character building. If the enemy is the existence of concepts, then it would make sense to fight with the ability to nullify said concepts. These people are who I mean when I say,
I'm going to have to negate that justice.
Negators. Negators make up the entirety of our main cast, as they are broken between the good faction, the Union, which we primarily follow, or, evil secret society turned found family, and the actual villain faction Under, whom we bump into periodically whenever they want to start a fight or cause drama. Negators, such as the name implies, negate certain actions or phenomenon, either on themselves or on others, sometimes willingly, usually not. And these abilities actually range quite a bit and get crazy powerful. To give some examples, there's Andy, who makes up the undead half of the title, and his ability allows him to nullify the effects of anything that would kill him, whether that be preventing a zombie curse from taking over, regenerating from a wound that could hypothetically get bad enough that it kills him, burning, tearing, hell, even aging. And while the regeneration effect of the undead ability alone is limitless, the fact that he can believably use his power to fly by regenerating blood fast enough to cause a propulsion effect, or use his almost severed body parts as a hard-hitting projectile, shows how versatile negator abilities can be, and man, do they have room to grow based on how you perceive your ability. The thing that makes negator abilities so powerful, however, is just how absolute they are. When a negator named Titania is introduced as untouchable, then there is literally no way to touch her since her ability manifests as a barrier that crushes anything in its radius or repels anyone out of its range. And while lesser series would use abilities like these as benchmarks to show how strong a character's ability is, when Undead Unluck says someone's ability is unbreakable, it is unbreakable. No one has so much negation energy that they're able to break it, or has so much willpower that they can overcome the betraying power of injustice. And despite everyone being so strong, no one is unbeatable, as every negator ability has its weakness. So fights are a two-way puzzle where each participant in the fight is trying to find the strengths and weaknesses in whatever their enemy is negating. No one can move when being targeted by Unmove, but if you find some way to obscure his vision, which is part of his activation condition, then it deactivates. Andy's regeneration prevents him from dying, but if you lock him in a strong enough container, then there won't be enough room for him to regenerate enough to matter. And while there is very prominent action that the anime does an immaculate job in gruesome regeneration detail, watching characters formulate plans and try to find these exploits is easily the most engaging part of a fight, especially when a character realizes how much of a hard counter another negator is to them. Rip, the negator for Unrepair, prevents any wound he inflicts from healing. This applies to both the body's natural ability to heal, but also anything the mind can do to treat their own wound. So this naturally hard counters Undead, that is, until Andy regenerates on the grounds of using an attack, which for one time skirts around Rip's specifications. It's a fantastic power system that's only limited by a negator's comprehension of the subject of their negation. But if you noticed, at no point were these negator abilities referred to as powers, and that's because negator abilities aren't superpowers or sorcery or magic or anything like that. They are personalized curses that haunt every negator that was unfortunate enough to be caught in the eyes of a cruel god. To find out how this insane power system's best aspect is the character writing, it's best to look at the artist behind the series. Yoshifumi Tezuka, despite only having 3 known published manga, has such a distinct writing style compared to other manga artists either in or out of Jump. Like Undead Unluck's previously mentioned puzzle-based combat that emulates his interest in both fighting games and card games. Or the focus on different locations in the series being purely the entertainment value being at that location can bring on a surface level. Like when the characters went to Canada, the only location relevant moment was when they ate poutine. That said, Yoshifumi Tezuka has 2 core distinct writing qualities that serve not only as his literary signature across all 3 of his known works, but also as the 2 pillars that make Undead Unluck stand so tall, each of which can be found in his 2 one-shots that he made prior to Undead Unluck serialization. Those being Super Heavy Charge Vanguard and Cosmic Arc Travel. The first quality is how the world in Tezuka's manga always starts off as fairly comparable to our own world. That is, before an absolute cavalcade of different ideas and concepts for world building that end up being incomparable to our own pile in. In Cosmic Arc Travel, the story starts off with the introduction of the commodification of space travel, even to a point of a shoddy school bus being able to explore the galaxy. That's crazy, but hardly the tip of the iceberg, as you see this passenger right here? Yeah, he's actually a prince who's running away from his royal family, but his parents? They got captured by space pirates, and it's okay because the 2 people running the shoddy tourism bus are actually secret pirates from the space pirate era, which is like over, I guess. All of these details get spelled out to you in just 29 pages, and it works. Undead Unluck did a similar method of world building, introducing negators, did advanced technology, artifacts, apparently space doesn't exist, but it was a little harder to notice in the 24 volumes that Undead Unluck has. And you don't even know the half of it. It gives the feeling that you have reason to believe that you can't assume anything about the series, which lets the series get so wacky. But that's just the flesh of Yoshifumi Tezuka's work. The second pillar is the soul, which is showcased beautifully in his second one-shot, Super Heavy Charge Vanguard. Aliens invade Earth, and for whatever reason, eat specifically money. To combat this, a belt was designed to turn someone with enough synergy into the mech-like hero Super Heavy Charge Vanguard. With a premise like that, one could reasonably assume that this one-shot would spend its 43-page runtime building up to a fight with 4 drops for context and story, and maybe a little comedy. What actually happens is a character-driven story about the perfect match for the belt due to how he values money and the billionaire girl who designed the belt. Kanashi Kintaro originally declined the offer for the belt on the grounds that he had multiple part-time jobs whom the employers he respects too much to just leave high and dry. In an effort to understand him, Renko and Kinka followed him from job to help him while trying to convince him to take up the heroic mantle. Through their time spent bonding, it's revealed that Kintaro's value of money comes from the fact that his parents took their own lives when he was younger and he was forced to do what he could so his family could survive. What starts off with a wacky, off-the-walls premise like money-eating aliens is actually the grounds of a construction of two complete opposite characters understanding each other for a mutual care for humanity. In 43 pages, we were given a crazy premise grounded with human characters that make it somehow feel real. And it works. But, like I said, Undead Unluck doesn't have 43 pages. It has 24 entire volumes to show its tragedy folded into an absurd world. That tragedy being the negator abilities that were forced onto everyone, and the humanity comes from what those characters do when pushed up against the wall, having their entire life taken from them. Earlier, I called negator abilities curses and then proceeded to talk about how they outpace more traditional power systems in terms of how they scale. That's because negator abilities seem like incredible superpowers on the surface. The core difference between negator abilities and, say, curse techniques is that negator abilities are not defined by what abilities are given, but instead what phenomenon is taken away. Fuko, the unluck half of Undead Unluck, can very well summon meteorites from space to absolutely demolish anyone she makes contact with, but the trigger for her unlock is anyone she makes contact with. And what makes that ability even worse is that it becomes more destructive the more that she likes the person that she's touching. So she has to not only avoid touching anyone directly ever, but if she forms a bond with that person, it's even more dangerous. Titania's force field would also probably serve as shonen hero pretty well, but it wasn't bestowed onto a hero, it was given to a little girl just celebrating her birthday. She was not given the ability untouchable, she just became untouchable. While the absolute nature of negator abilities is a boon in combat, it's little more than a horrific curse to people like Titania who can never hug her parents again. Even abilities like Undead aren't giving benefits, and he isn't regenerating, it's just a possible death that is being undone. And this smothering curse to no longer live a normal life affects every negator both in the Union as well as under, where everyone is just doing what they can to cope and live with their abilities. With that in mind, considering the entire cast of Undead Unluck, you would have a hard time pointing at a single negator outside of Fuko and saying any of them are truly good people or bad people, as even the villains have little glimpses of humanity snuck in there. They are just hurt people who happen to fall down a certain path. And maybe in another world, every negator could have been on the same side in the fight against God. Titania isn't getting focused for any specific reason. She's just one of the many examples that had a phenomenon taken away from them, and each person who has experienced this has faced a similar tragedy. Chikara, while able to control Unmove, accidentally triggered it on his parents in the middle of the road. He only realized that he was the reason they stopped moving once he deactivated his ability, unfreezing his parents and the truck that was barreling towards them. While every negator has a similar story, no one fits the absolute crush and despair, and yet reflects the attitude that is the essence of Undead Unluck, quite like Akira Kuno. Akira Kuno was an average child, with one key exception. He loved drawing and creating stories for his mom to read. Full of an ambitious drive, one day he found a G-pen, the sort of pen manga artists use, and with the common price of them, if this story took place in any other manga, it would have ended up just being a pretty lucky day for Akira. Unfortunately, this was going to be the most unlucky moment of Akira's entire life, as he would soon find out. When he picked up the pen, a marvelous story about people who could nullify aspects of the world came flooding into his head. Like, the history of an entire world rushed into him into a hurricane of creative inspiration. He ran home and waited to tell his mom this brilliant story he came up with. But when she came home, she couldn't see him. She couldn't hear his voice. She couldn't feel his touch. Akira Kuno had become the negator unknown, wiping traces of anything tied to his name from the world. He couldn't do anything but watch as his mom wondered where her son went, unable to wish for anything other than his happiness. Picking up the G-pen gave him all the information about this world and its most vital moments, at the cost of him being functionally erased from the world. Negator abilities are cruel. While incredibly powerful, there isn't a single ability that someone would want to have. That said, a power system that causes pain is not why the cast of Undead Unluck is so interesting, or why negator abilities are used to make characters so deceptively complex. Suffering in literature alone doesn't make a compelling narrative. What makes it compelling is how the characters react to it. Akira Kuno isn't interesting for his existential nightmare of an ability. It's how he found a loophole that if he signs something under an alias, it's allowed to exist in the world. Akira Kuno doesn't exist, but Anno Un does, and with this loophole and apparently the fact that the G-Pen can physically create stuff as it's an artifact, he created a sci-fi shoujo manga that would tell the events of Undead Unluck obscured in a plotline that the average reader wouldn't catch on to. Akira Kuno chose to fight, just like every negator in both the Union and Under who didn't like the hand they were dealt. And it is how each character reacts and responds to the challenge that makes such a vast and unique cast unlike any other in shonen manga. Due to how negator abilities are given to random people at the worst time, Undead Unluck's cast, as implied, are far from shonen action heroes. While My Hero Academia has a classroom full of students who want to become actual superheroes, and Jujutsu Kaisen is centered around a secret society that is on a conquest to stop curses from destroying human civilization, Undead Unluck's cast features, a high schooler, a middle schooler, she didn't even make it to high school, an undead guy, a scientist, a martial artist, oh that fits, while the Union has plenty of actual combatants who are consistently cooler than you or I will ever be, it's hard to believe that this is a cast that plans on fighting God. Like, yeah, Chikara agreed to join and do what he could to help after coming to terms of his ability, but he also had like pre-calc the week before he joined. Though Undead Unluck isn't just a bunch of fish out of water stories where characters are out of their depth all the time. Chikara, for example, overcomes both his fear from the consistent life-threatening encounters that are in his life now, and the weakness his negator ability has, which requires him to not move while using it. This is the case for most of the characters who start off overwhelmed, and seeing them grow due to their abilities and become stronger and better people through these experiences is so delightful. But what makes you cross the bridge from rooting for these negators to truly connecting with them is just how much characterization is done from how they live with their negator abilities. If Fuko Izumo makes physical contact with someone, she will trigger her unluck, and her design alone shows how conscious she is of this fact. With gloves, long sleeves, and a beanie covering where most places of physical contact could accidentally happen. And it's not just her design that reflects this. The tiny considerations that go into every action make her feel so human despite the, meteorites. The way before a cliche punch-down scene, she throws a pillow to avoid direct contact. How she plans her movements in advance to make sure misfortune doesn't hit anyone she approaches. Or how her backstory of not being able to go to a high school out of fear of hurting people, but loving a high school romance manga has given her a romanticized perception of what it's like. The amount of consideration that has gone into making Fuko's curse feel real has made her development from being socially awkward to pulling a gun on a manga editor. Seeing the anime change for some reason doesn't feel like manga quirkiness, it feels like Fuko has developed endurance from her curse. And it's the same for so many negators. From Top learning to wear armor because his ability requires him to break bones, to Titania having a way to eat cake despite her force field. But if you want the best example of a character with a stupidly outrageous power that's somehow humanized because of it, look no further than the man behind the undead negator ability, Andy. Andy's the co-protagonist in Undead Unluck, and other than his catchphrase "Wicked Sick" that I have overused in real life, the thought that has gone into his character fully justifies his narrative status. Andy, as stated before, is outright immortal due to his ability. Anything that could result in his death is simply nullified through a form of regeneration. Whether that be an injury, poison, aging, suffocation, if it can kill him, it's undone. But the way his undying nature is approached stands out from other similar characters in manga. Typically, an immortal character, even if followed early on into their lives, tend to be pretty strongly defined by their past. Andy, however, is defined by not only his past, but his present and ideal future. From the various proficiencies he picked up throughout his hundreds of years of life that has shown he has had time in spades, to the value he has for his comrades that he fights alongside in present time. Andy's past didn't desensitize him to death or the danger to those around him who are fortunate enough to be able to receive a fatal wound. When he's around, he won't let that fortune strike them. And that's not to mention how off the battlefield, this man oozes with charm on his ongoing romantic dynamic with Fuko. Engaging for not only that, but also the way they carve out tiny moments in near apocalyptic levels of chaos, it's just so endearing. though that's not the case for the early stages of the manga. But what elevates Andy the most as a character came from a singular moment in the manga, when given the opportunity to manifest his spirit as an ideal version of himself, the one he truly wishes for. Now, keep this in mind. Andy is a pretty bombastic guy, using his own body multiple times to get one over on his opponent, using it to test the limits of an Uma, just generally being a tad reckless here and there. To almost contrast that, the version of himself he truly wishes to be is just growing old. The biggest aspect of what living with disability has deprived him from. Certain characters were highlighted, but short of the title characters, none of them are special compared to the rest of the cast, as all of them in the Lil Found family of nullifiers are monuments to exquisite character writing, and most manga would be lucky to have a Shin, who's my favorite character by the way, or a Juiz, who I somehow didn't mention once this entire time. And Undead Unluck has an entire extended cast of these characters. However, if you were to stop the video right now to start the manga, please don't, you would not be met with the characters I have described, nor the themes or arcs gushed about up until now. To truly show you what I mean and how it manages to represent the true value of the series, allow me to loop to the very start of Undead Unluck and what you would be first met with upon turning the first page. Meet Andy. Andy's really quirky. He's also inconsiderate, optionally picks the most dangerous options just for the excitement, and is perfectly fine with killing someone if their death benefits him. And he also tends to not think twice about it. Andy's only goal at the start of the series is to find a way to die, which is why he protects Fuko. He has the idea that if he can cause her unlock that gets stronger the more she likes someone, with the kiss causing bigger strokes of unlock, if he can make her fall in love with him and they, and I quote, bump uglies, he'll probably die. While admittedly entertaining in the early chapters, he is far from grounded and especially far from being likable. Meet Fuko. Fuko has very little agency. Most of her early involvement starts and ends with being taken from place to place by Andy and used for ineffective comedy by being groped to cause big strokes of unlock. Andy's plan to romance Fuko is supposedly effective due to the fact that she's a pushover. Together, they are chased by the super evil organization, the Union, that polices negators by killing or capturing them, and our title duo fights them off. This was Undead Unluck's formula in the early chapters, and while it was fairly enjoyable as this is where the puzzle-centric combat was introduced, it felt shallow and quite frankly, predictable. Most encounters being dealt with a low time stroke of unlock via a repeating joke that didn't land the first time with little to no downtime in between fights. This very well could have remained the case. Undead Unluck could have been a fairly fun shonen romp that you read for the cool power system. But something happened in the inner workings of Undead Unluck, and the story began to change, or should I say, it got the ability to change. The first time negators from the Union attack Andy and Fuko, Fuko gets the idea to join their organization so they don't have to fear being hunted for the rest of their lives. The catch, however, is that only 10 negators can be a part of the Union at a time due to rules dictated by the Round Table. Andy killed Unavoidable, so that freed up one spot, and if they eliminate one more member, he and Fuko can both join. Considering that this is the first time in the series that Andy and Fuko have been on the attack, as they were given information that a member of the Round Table would be in Russia, the arc starts off uncharacteristically calm. After chapters full of nothing but buildings, planes, and just about anything else exploding in a bloody parade of combat, Undead Unluck has its first scene that's main purpose isn't increasing someone's heart rate. Andy goes off to find his old war buddies to help with the fight against the negator they're tracking down. The fact that Andy has war buddies will never be brought up again. And Fuko's off on her own for the first time since the series began. Though she's not alone for long as she bumps into an energetic girl that invites Fuko to paint a night sky along with her, the topic of change comes up, and if it's good or not. After hesitation, Fuko says yes and proves this belief by showing her finished painting where she changed the night sky to be speckled with stars. Other than being a brilliant way to reveal the information that the universe is empty except the Earth, Sun, and Moon, this was a tipping point for the energetic girl to reveal her identity as the unchanged negator, Gina. Gina is against change, wanting everything to stay the same, going as far as freezing her appearance so that age can never visibly change how she looks. Her negator ability supports this, as it's primarily used to make the air around her freeze as if it were a solid object, making it unable to change as well. Fuko gets attacked, Andy interferes, and the series delivers on another fun hot and cold gets to power in their limitation showdown that they've proven proficiency in. Naturally, the fight scene isn't what's special about this arc. It's what happens after that truly defines what Undead Unluck will be for the rest of its run. Another quiet moment falls onto the pages as Gina lies in a crater that would soon become her deathbed. She talks about how beautiful Fuko's change to the horizon was, and how desperately she wished she could change the Union from its corrupt ways, change the world, change herself, but she wasn't strong enough. Andy, the one person she loved, after causing his own fair share of careless carnage, shows her sympathy as she fades away from her own injuries, her makeup cracking away as she does so, changing how she looked a little bit. And with that, Undead Unluck is different now. Andy's become so much more human and has found care for reasons beyond his own personal excitement. Fuko developed her own agency, sparking the desire to change the Union so it wouldn't make someone suffer the same way Gina did. And while it did sort of slowly fix itself on its own, Gina's death, Unchange's death, is what started a thread of change that would see us shift to the very essence of Undead Unluck, beyond what could ever be explained as just character development. Almost like how the world changes when an Uma dies, the series and all its characters unlock the ability to change, which is not only where the series gets most of its narrative strength from, but is also where every Negator's power truly comes from. The power to change what's in front of them, the power to change themselves, the power to want to change despite all the hardships they face. Fuko developed and overcame her weakness to help the Union's goal of defeating God. Andy changed into a kinder, more gentle person that appreciates life. And this focus is what separates the strongest characters from the weakest, as it's the ability to change how you perceive what you negate that allows the ability to evolve. I originally picked up Undead Unluck while I was working on the Ruby video because I wanted a fun, shallow shonen to read that wouldn't take up too much space in my head. I did not get what I wanted. Instead, I got this immaculate story that showed that even in a world with powers that let people sit on the sun for 1 billion years, the most powerful ability that anyone can have is the ability to change yourself and the world around you. And I think that's sick. Wicked sick. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to subscribe because I have more videos like this one coming. And I know I said this video would have been out a lot faster, but between revisions the script doubled in size and well, I just didn't manage my time. Oh, no did I. I know I said it last time, but the next video should be out sooner. If you'd like to find out if that's true or not, and you'd like to see what, I've been up to, any updates I got going on, check me out on Blue Sky where I post any number of things. Oh, and I had to put it on ice when I fell behind on this video, but I'm also going to start streaming on Twitch again. It'll be pretty fun. With that said, again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.